Ken Lima here, we have myself, Shawna Gokunar, and we have Jason here, and we have Stuart Rhodes here. Therefore, we have made quorum. So my sort of outline of what would be the patient advocacy final report, and I just want to kind of throw out the outline and then throw out my concepts for the veterans final report and see what Thomas thinks of that. I did bring people up to the speed that our last annual report from the task force did not include anything from the veterans due to the fact that they had not been formed yet and really up and going, so it's very important that they add their chapter this round. I think the first thing that I wanted to cover was emergency safe access, and I wanted to detail our Pelosi action and success. We did something as a committee that made national news, and that was we got 4,000 signed postcards to our federal representative, who's Nancy Pelosi, who obviously is a big wig in D.C. And we made, I mean, the news stories were astronomical, but I'm thinking that we take the West Coast lead Pelosi story because it has my co-chair, Elise Cleveland, noted in it, and she was and has been the person kind of helping us work with Pelosi's office because she has an in through the HIV community and working with Dan Bernal, who is Pelosi's sort of second-hand man. So I think that going through how our action was a success, and then also saying, but we haven't implemented any emergency safe access plans for the city. We still have no plan in place.
For emergency.
I guess that's the plan, but just permitting more MCDs isn't increasing patient safe access, right? So I wanted to put that in there. I wanted to put in also under emergency safe access that at our last task force gathering, I can't call it a meeting, at the last task force gathering where we were one shy once again from meeting quorum, Raymond Gamley of Divinity Tree, Charlie Pappas of Divinity Tree, and Martin Olive of Vapor Room had brought up that they had tried to gain some access to public lands to be able to distribute to their membership, and that the mayor had vetoed it. So I think it's important that we include in the Pelosi action and safe, emergency safe access plans that there had been a plan by Olive and Charlie Pappas. To date, I had asked them about a petition, etc. I haven't gotten anything back from them, but I think it's important to mention. And then I also think something that we got a little bit of traction on, but not a full discussion, was the healthy SF coverage. And that's an idea that was voted in support of during the annual report, and was even talked about in the working groups creating the legislation. That's something that we'd really like the city to help us with, so that as administrators of compassion programs, if somebody's on healthy SF and their copay and etc., you have a much easier way of knowing how to help that individual. And I just think it's a good thing to put in our emergency safe access sort of category. The other category that I think is really, really important, and last time, let the record reflect that committee member Crane is here. One thing that we've consistently been talking about, and one thing that has been highlighted in the news recently, is medical cannabis in public housing and SROs. And when we last gathered, Stuart asked everybody around the room to go around and say, what is the most critical thing to every, patient advocate in the room? And a lot of what came out was housing concerns. And we've heard this, at the task force level, at the committee level, and I think that we have already put in for a solution, and that is the CCF model, which is being able to have sort of vapor facilities for people that cannot medicate because of being in federal housing. And it's not like an ultimate national solution, but it's a bridging solution. The other thing I wanted to I had 4 points, and I want to kind of switch 2 of them up. The third one, I think, should be legislative fix in post-election Obama era. So a lot of what we heard for the last year and a half, almost 2 years, is we can't do anything with the legislation because who knows who's going to win the election and how much risk a particular, board will be in for doing something. But I think there's 2 legislative fix that would greatly benefit patient advocates and that are not risky in the post-election. And one would be re-looking at the definition of MCD and not having it correspond to even just more recent legislation that's been proposed, and having it actually mean a cannabis business, not a more than 9 people. And then the other one that would be really easy and was voted on in our last annual report is the Mercury legislation that dealt with compassionate care, and just striking NON so that it's actually binding, so that all city permitted collectives have some type of compassion program. Now, of course, their whole thing has always been, well, how are you going to implement that and how are you going to enforce it? Well, the legislation doesn't call for, an enforcement. It calls for simply each dispensary creating their own compassion program. There's a lot of loose language there. It shouldn't tie anybody up, but then it also makes it so that there isn't, let's say, HopeNet and Waterfall Wellness and Vapor Room and, one other collective taking care of everybody, right? I mean, sharing might be a little bit of a gist. And Lord knows it might take a moment to actually get going, but those are the 2 legislative fixes that I can see us recommending on behalf of patients that are easily done, and I don't think Melinda Hogg would come down here and scream at our supervisors and say, oh my God, you're defining medical cannabis as a business, the definition of MCD as a business, and you're actually supporting that every collective have a compassion program. I don't see that creating a lot of political anxiety in our U.S. attorneys, and I think it would actually benefit the businesses and the patients to have something like that to stand on. And then the third one, or the fourth one, is I think we have to acknowledge that it might be best to kind of part the paths of heavy lobby-influenced businesses and patient advocates. We've spent sort of a lot of time in battle, and I have some solutions. And when I say patient advocate, I don't mean that if you're involved with a medical cannabis business that you're not a patient advocate. Like when I've spoken with Raymond Ganley from Divinity Tree, he's definitely in support of it. He's like, I would want to sit on a patient advocacy board. Even though I run a medical cannabis business, my interest is in making sure that patients are served. Yes, beautiful. So my suggestions are having sort of a more protected environment for the patient advocates, and maybe having us primarily work with the MOD, which is the Mayor's Office on Disability, and the Health Commission, and then putting a seat for cannabis lobbyists on our city's Small Business Commission. So in other words, instead of saying recreate the whole task force, say let's get a seat for, you know, a lobbyist seat on the Small Business Commission for the medical cannabis businesses, and let's take the patient advocates with the people that support the patient movement from the cannabis industry and streamlining us into advising sort of the Mayor's Office on Disability and the Health Commission.
Is the word business going to be involved with dispensary operators? Because some of them may be operating under different models of describing themselves.
If you run a nonprofit, you run a nonprofit business. If you have a retail business, you have a retail business. I don't know why that would be offensive. Business isn't a bad word.
My public comment about that?
Okay. Hop on, Freebird. I don't know. I mean, what do you think, Christina? Is business a bad word? Because what I'm looking for is getting a really good business advocate on our Small Business Commission and actually being a part of the greater business community that's influencing City Hall, having our way in come there instead of having, and that would be a seat that different, different businesses, city permitted businesses would possibly compete for. You know, patients would be able to get up and say, hey, I'd rather support this person having the small business seat than this person. You know, could be a good thing. And then I think us being able to start to work with the Mayor's Office on Disability and being able to say, look, how do we get the people that for the last 16 years of Prop 215 from the city that it originated at actually served in some sort of universal and fair way throughout our distribution system.
I think there's a point in separating the word business from patients in the fact that some patients are underserved by the word business. I see it constantly with a lot of patients that don't meet their needs. None of it meets their needs because they're poor. They don't have the money to provide for themselves. I think the city myself should move more in a direction of separate business from patients because of the simple fact that patients could be better served by the city. If it wasn't that a business model or business wasn't inside of the advocate and activist members, like if you don't separate the business from it, then you're not really serving the patients, in my eyes.
But I think both, I think in win-win, because I kind of have a foot in both. And I think it's a win for the cannabis community in San Francisco to gain a seat on the Small Business Commission, because then it puts us in league. We're already paying a significant amount into the general fund of the city, a significant amount. Other small businesses are already seated that even maybe contribute less than the cannabis community does to the general fund. Getting that business school person onto the Small Business Commission and then getting a combination, I think, of people who are they themselves low-income advocates and people who serve low-income communities willingly, talking with the Mayor's Office on Disability and the Health Commission about models to do this better might serve us better than trying to combat at the task force level, whether the task force is about business or whether it's about patients, you know.
So I guess that was kind of my reason for saying it, is that, you know, over the course of this last year and a half watching the Federal Cannabis Task Force, what I've seen is that the in-house fighting mostly is about, or in-house disagreements are mostly about just what I just said. is there's people in there and people who don't have money to purchase cannabis who are copping resentments because there's people in there who are just running off at the mouth who can. And that's how the people who have no money feel. And then I see the people who have money who are running businesses a lot of the time. It's like, you know, they don't really want to see these people, or they, you know, they're, you know, the way I've seen them is they've acted really, really bad towards the people who don't have money.
Well,
And
they had a lack of public decorum that was despicable.
I'm just saying that, yeah, well, you know, and just saying this, and that I think that the people who don't have money, who are trying to meet their medical concerns and needs, are finding themselves in this position where there's somebody against them. And I think that if we separate business from patients, like the actual people who have no money, who live in the, say, District 6 or whatever, they're feeling there's this combatant thing. And I think in order to take that fight away, if we know that this person is a business lobbyist, then they're a business lobbyist. And I don't think that if we don't separate there's always going to be that tension, I think, personal tension. And I think in order to get rid of a lot of that personal tension, what we should do is really figure out ways of saying, okay, this is a business model. Okay, this is a nonprofit model, period. I mean,
well, they can't, all the businesses are required by California law to be nonprofit. So there's no for-profit medical cannabis businesses in this city. You could argue the point, but I don't really think that it's a good point to argue for everyone's well-being. I guess my objective in getting us into the Mayor's Office of Disability and Health Commission to look at ways to create models to serve people that aren't being served by the current model, or taking the burden off the few clubs that are serving people that have medical needs that they can't afford. If you go into the Mayor's Office of Disability, there's already advocates that have already trailblazed for people to get access to health care. Those, I think, are the people that could best help us create the solutions that we're looking for. And just me personally, just if I could say something personal, if nobody minds, I can't go through another, you know, I've been here 10 years. I can't go through another 10 years of battling lobbyists. I want to actually work on good, sound public policy, you know, that benefits everybody. And I think what we got caught up in a lot at the task force level was different competitive business interests. I mean, we had somebody who was really, really interested in taking out their competition with delivery services, to the point where people that weren't even known to the known patient advocate community, just general public, was coming up and saying, why are we focused on this? You know, and we had a whole 2 months of people we didn't even know coming in and going, when exactly are you going to be talking about safe access?
That's my exact point, is right there, is that we had several of those incidences time after time. And my point is that it serves the patients none. It just wastes all of our time, pretty much. You know, we didn't get very much done when we could have. You know, if we can at least know who's who in the room that we're standing in, we can at least fight for what we believe in, instead of having people who are just going to take up our whole time and then filibuster us and do all these different techniques of obstruction to really stop us from doing anything whatsoever that was constructive. None of it was constructive. In fact, it just made a lot of people in our community not like each other, which totally isn't getting anything done.
They already didn't like each other.
Well, I know. I'm just saying that doesn't help the,
But it wasn't constructive.
It doesn't make the purpose. And the purpose is that we're all, you know, fighting for hopefully the same solutions to our problems. And I know they're not all the same solutions, you know, from being in that room. So
the thing is, there's a lot more common ground than there's a negative ground. It's just the half cup, half full, half empty thing. And I think that, you know, by the parting of ways and advising the city to get a seat on the Small Business Commission for a cannabis business lobbyist or representative, and having the people from the business industry and the patient advocates that want to secure a way for people who can't afford their medicine to receive their medicine within San Francisco's model, get to focus on that and work with people that have already fought the fight for disabled access, you know, and know it's a socioeconomic battle, you know. I mean, the Mayor's Office on Disability knows that it costs a lot of money to be disabled and poor.
Yeah, I think basically, you know, Steve and Shona are saying the same thing. And the idea of bifurcating makes sense when you can't have a consensus or even a working, you know, forum. You can't maintain that structure that is not able to be, you know, in some way able to work together. So we need to do that bifurcation, and whether you call the business dispensaries, you know, one label or another, which was the only question that I had before, that bifurcation I think needs to happen.
I think there's an idea that we could use is just come up with a set of goals, and if they don't meet the goals, then they're outside of the curriculum of the meeting. And then there's the other part that, you know, I catch my thought there. The bottom line is that if we have an agenda, it's like use, the word use. Everybody looks at use as a bad thing, you know, and it's just whether you use people in a good way or a bad way. And it goes back and forth, whether our relationship is good or it's not good. And it doesn't mean that our relationship can be bad and we can't use each other in a good way. I just think that there just needs to be more of a guideline and a goal at the end of this. I don't think that we're fighting, because we're fighting for so many different reasons is what I'm saying.
Just to give a reality check, you will probably, you know, this will probably be one of the last patient advocacy meetings. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be kind of, you know, making sure that we get a working group going so that we can get, you know, the 2 final chapters done. And then just so people understand, having a task force is probably not going to happen again for a very long time.
Well,
it's just not going to. You know, there might be some sort of secretive business association that will meet in John Avalos' office or Campos's office, and they'll work on business concerns. Eric has pushed it to the point where he does not want, basically what he told Chris Roberts, the reporter, is that he felt that he was being unfairly treated during public comment, which any supervisor, anybody could say, and that's why it's public. You need to be aware that the public can come and comment. And if they're not, if they're more comfortable with a boardroom setting or in a business association, then that's fine. But let's take the people and let's remember the people and who they were that worked well with the patient community. Raymond Gamley, Martin Olive, you know, Christina Kennan, people that come to the table that work well, that know public decorum and don't have a problem working with the public. But then we know, right, I mean, the business association doesn't belong in City Hall, but those are things for them to sort out. I'm trying to look for a way for us to exist and be able to be in communication with the best city departments to help us further our goal of increasing safe access for low-income and disabled patients. And that's why I'm saying the Mayor's Office on Disability and the Health Commission are the only 2 routes that I can think of.
I was just going to comment that, yeah, it's very smart. Just get that business associated with the lobbyists for low-income patients in there. Absolutely. I mean, it doesn't matter if you use the word business, because if you don't use the word business, then they're automatically going to think, well, you're not going to work with us, and they're going to think, well, if they're going to work against the business model, maybe we can't work see eye to eye. So, you know, it's just a word. And if you're going to work with low-income patients, it doesn't matter if that word actually exists in there, does it?
It doesn't really, except for, you know, I think that it's important to ask for a seat on the Small Business Commission for our city permitted collectives, because I think that we're a part of that orbit, you know, and I think the separation of the ways could support both affinity groups in a much more positive way, instead of having us cancel each other out and cause problems with the public, with our city officials, etc. Until we maybe, you know, 3 years down the line, things will sort themselves out and we'll have a new cast of folks that could all come together in a better display publicly, but, you know, we're going to have to work quickly because the next task force meeting is next week on the 27th. And of course, because we have people that are boycotting and because we've lost a few members, we're not going to be able to make quorum. But what I am going to ask the task force members that show up and former task force members is to sign on individually to the final report. It's going to be the first thing that's out in the public that has really succinct, factual numbers of how many patients were affected by the federal crackdown and yada, yada, yada.
Do you know what's going on with that, by the way? The federal crackdown with the letters and all that business?
Well, today, Harborside is in federal court, was in federal court this morning. I haven't read all the articles. I don't know if articles have come out yet, whether they won or lost, but I believe this round is to determine whether the landlords can prevent them from continuing to sell cannabis on their two store sites while they're in federal forfeiture procedures. So the federal government, the only ones that I know of in the Bay Area that they have gone ahead with a federal forfeiture procedure and said we're taking the building is Harborside, and Harborside is in a battle.
Yeah,
with
they're fighting that, yeah.
And they're fighting that, and it could be really, really good that they're fighting it, or it could be really, really bad that they're fighting it. It all depends on a lot of what gets ruled on today. And that could really affect everybody, because then if they, you know, get something where the federal government is saying, look, you're going to stop all sales right now, and we're going to take these buildings. That doesn't just affect Harborside, that affects all of our possibilities of ever being rented to again.
Wow.
The minute some landlord gets their entire property confiscated from them.
It's like war all over again.
Yes. So I want everybody to be really alert about watching the news tonight and getting online. And really watching the articles about the
attorneys were supposed to be just trying to get a continuance today.
Really?
They don't have enough information yet to actually go to court and have these successful.
Another continuance? How many is that now?
I don't think they've ever had a continuance.
They haven't.
Really?
They're just trying to go, they're trying to get enough information going to court properly. That's all that information has. Because attorneys didn't have enough information yet to go to court.
Because they filed motions.
Yeah, they filed a bunch of they filed like 7 motions. They haven't been in court yet.
Because there's been back and forth on motions, like the city of Oakland filed, and then
That's basically what's going on still.
Which I don't know how I feel about the city of Oakland filing and saying, hey, a percentage of our city's income comes from these folks, so you can't take the dispensary.
I do plan